speech starting now. Corporal punishment remains legal in many states despite evidence that it harms kids, not only physically and mentally, but in how they interact with other children, says Robert D. Saig, a past member of the AAP Committee on Child Abuse and Neglect, in a 2018 journal titled American Academy of Pediatrics says spanking harms children. Corporal punishment is using physical discipline as punishment. Spanking is a form of punishment that many parents and schools still use. I've researched articles, journals, documentaries, and even interviewed someone who was spanked as a child and still has negative impacts in their adulthood. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the issues that stem from spanking, which include violence, family mistrust, sexual issues in adulthood, and continued behavioral issues in schools, which should all lead to the legalization of corporal punishment. First, I'll tell you a little more about corporal punishment so that you can better understand the problem. According to a 2020 article titled Facts About Corporal Punishment by psychotherapist Amy Morin, 81% of Americans privately support spanking children, and 19 out of 50 states still implement it in schools. Spanking can be hitting with a hand, a belt, a paddle, switches, spoons, and basically any implement that can enforce pain onto someone. Any use of pain and discomfort is also considered corporal punishment, but today we're going to be solely focusing on spanking since that's usually what is primarily used in schools and homes when talking about corporal punishment. Spanking is not positive reinforcement. It uses physical pain to make a child obey through fear. Hurting children as punishment can be extremely emotionally damaging to them and result in violent tendencies. Speaking of violent tendencies, let's talk about how corporal punishment can cause them. Lisa Black, in a 2018 journal titled AAP Says Spanking Harms Children, states, corporal punishment may cause a child to be fearful in short term, but does not improve behavior over the long term, and may cause more aggressive behaviors, according to the AAP. In one study, young children who were spanked more than twice a month at the age of 3 were more aggressive at the age of 5. Those same children exhibited the exact same behavioral problems at the age of 9, according to the research. Research clearly shows that corporal punishment causes violence in children. This is alarming because, as said earlier, 81% of Americans privately support spanking children. Children becoming violent from corporal punishment produces the complete opposite results that parents and administrators are trying to inflict with this corporal punishment. In fact, it can make children's behavior worse. So now that we've talked about how corporal punishment causes violence and aggression in children, let's talk about how it affects their relationship with their caregivers. Parents and guardians who spank their kids teach them to be afraid. Trust, security, and safety are things that kids look to their parents for. However, corporal punishment teaches them that their parents are not providing them with those things. This can lead children to see their parents in a negative light. I talked to Taylor Carter, who is a young adult who experienced being spanked as a child by both of her parents. I asked Taylor how she felt her relationship was with her parents as a child, and she states, being spanked made me not want to be around them. When I did something wrong, I felt really scared and it would overwhelm me. It made it hard for me to open up to them as a child because I didn't feel safe. Being spanked as a kid affected her relationship with her parents because she didn't feel a sense of security and safety that young kids need from their parents. So now that you know how spanking can impact their relationship with parents, let's talk about some issues that it will bring into adulthood. A 2009 article titled Correlations Between Childhood Spanking and Adult Sexual Behavior by B.A. Robinson conducted several studies which link corporal punishment to sexual issues in adults. One study, which surveyed 207 college students, found that 75% of students who had been spanked a lot by their parents were sexually aroused by masochistic sex. Of the studies conducted, there was a 93% agreement that suggests spanking is one of the roots of relationship violence and mental health problems in adults. This is because people who are spanked as children are taught to correlate violence with love. Spanking causing sexual issues in adults is a huge problem because they're confusing being physically hurt and loved together because this was ingrained on them in their early adolescence. So now that you have a good idea by now how spanking impacts children at home, let's talk about how corporal punishment will impact children at schools. Corporal punishment is still used in schools in 19 different states. These schools use paddling as their method of punishment. In the 2016 documentary, The Board of Education, a documentary about corporal punishment in U.S. public schools, Dr. George Holden says, 3 types of students are disproportionately paddled. Boys, African Americans, and children with disabilities such as autism are much more likely to be paddled. Teachers become frustrated and are ill-equipped to deal with the serious behavior problems that these children engage in, and they really don't know what else to do. Spanking and paddling works in the immediate context, so they think it is the only solution when it's not. To punish them and to hit them is totally misguided. In the documentary, it is shown that spanking is not the best way to deal with behavioral problems in school. Teachers often do it out of anger and take their problems out on their students, and is also not effective in changing many students' behavior long-term, but only temporarily. So to wrap things up, corporal punishment happens a lot in the U.S. at home and in schools. Hopefully today you've seen the problems that spanking causes and why it should be illegalized. Violence in children, negative relationship with caregiver, sexual issues in adulthood, and continued behavioral issues in schools are all issues that we've discussed today that are a direct result of corporal punishment. With all this research that points away from it, I hope that you can all advocate with me to legalize corporal punishment. We are all college students who may not have experienced corporal punishment in our upbringing. We can't change that, but what we can change is how we discipline our future children. Without violence, fear, and aggression, but with love, security, and stability. We can also advocate for a change in the schools that still support this painful practice. Thank you.